Greetings, family. Welcome to the African Exodus show. I'm your host, Tony Cherie, here to you with a new video. Before we get started with today's segment, to remind you, if you'd like to be connected outside of YouTube, you have two ways to do so. First, you can go to Telegram. That is a free app, very easy to download. There, I post anytime that I upload a new video, and that's also a good way to message me and me get it back quickly. In addition, if you wish to also support this channel, you can do so through CashApp, and you can also do so through Patreon. On Patreon, I also post when I upload, and also I post a weekly exclusive just for you. Today, we're going to talk about a very deep subject. It's actually a subject that came up inside of a recent Bible study that I did on my other channel, Finding Yahusha. If you want to watch the discussion, it's very good. It was a discussion about essentially the scriptures that tell us that we are to flee from Babylon. And of course, the question that I think a lot of people struggle with is this a figurative flee or is this a literal flee? Is this a flee now or is it a flee later? Is it a flee for your physical well-being or is it a flee for your spiritual well-being? So I actually enjoyed the Bible study, and I think I even came away with a different thought process about what these scriptures mean than what I had been before willing to attribute them to, because there is a real physical element to this. Are we going to allow ourselves to be put in a situation like many of us were inside of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we were not able to make decisions for the best of our family, for the best of our health, or best of our body and our spiritual integrity? Instead, many of us had to make decisions in order to stay being inside of an employment situation, continue being a part of the capitalist system, continue enjoying the luxuries of Babylon. Many of us had to make a decision based on that, or many of us chose to make a decision based on that, instead of making a decision based on what's best for our families and ourselves. So this brings a really interesting question, because we only know just from scripture that things will get worse. We know that from scripture things will continue on the road that we are on. Things will continue to get difficult inside of the Western society. And so when we read scriptures like the ones I'm about to read about leaving and fleeing Babylon, can we just say that this is all spiritual, or can we say that this is a warning of a incoming doom? That even though you might be saved, you might be marked by Yahusha, you might be marked for his kingdom and marked for his glory, because of your proximity to wickedness, your proximity to evil, your proximity to the biggest empire to have ever existed throughout history. Because of your close proximity to this, will you be, unfortunately, a part of the judgment? Even though your soul might be saved, will you succumb to physical destruction because of your proximity to Babylon? So going to the scriptures, we're going to start with Zechariah 6. It says, "You there flee from the land of the north, declares Yahuwah, because I have spread you out like the four winds of heavens, declares Yahuwah, you Zion, you who are living with the daughter of Babylon. For Yahuwah of armies says this, after glory he has sent me against the nations that plunder you. For the one who touches you touches the apple of his eye. For behold, I am going to wave my hand over them, so that they will be plundered for their slaves. Then you will know that Yahuwah of armies has sent me." We're also going to go to Revelation 18. We're going to start with verse 4. "I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive any of her plagues. For her sins have piled as high as heaven. Yahuwah has remembered her offenses. Pay her back even as she has paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup which she has mixed twice as much for her. To the extent that she has glorified herself and lived luxuriously, to the same extent give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am not a widow, and I will never see mourning. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, plague and mourning and famine. And she will be burned with fire, and Yahuwah who judges her is strong." We know that the current world system is going to be judged by Yahuwah. We know that this is not just a judgment as far as the end judgment, but a judgment that's going to literally end with fire and brimstone and just utter destruction. We know this, right? But is it the case that this destruction will happen in such a way that the people of Yasharel, who are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, will they possibly succumb to any of the judgment of Babylon? And my answer to that would be that the fact is, Babylon itself is able to suck many people into its system. And those who it can manipulate to be a part of that system are going to succumb to it. It's all manipulation and it's all games. And if you're willing to die for your soul, then by all means, you will be preserved. However, if you're not willing to suffer that exact persecution for your soul, then they will find ways to convince you to submit to their authority. That's what we all read in the scriptures, that everyone will submit to the authority of a beast. People think the beast that they're submitting to is a person. No, the beast is the system. You read carefully, understanding it's the same system that has always existed, the same system that Daniel saw in a vision, the same system that Ezra saw in a vision. It's the same system, that same system. Everyone will submit to the beast system. Now, interestingly enough, in certain places, that submission is just going to be more difficult. One of the reasons it will be more difficult is because of the ability of this society to transfer their technological innovations to all parts of the world. One part of the world that has been identified by the same people who have outlined and written out the New World Order, how it will appear, what it will look like, who will be the players, who will be the major players. The same people who have given this outline to us made a determination that as for Africa, as for other countries like Africa, but Africa was specifically listed out. As for that region, that one is going to be very difficult to control. And I want to read with you about this fact inside of a book that I've read and I've referenced on this channel a couple of times. This is The Open Conspiracy by H.G. Wells. Literally, this man gave us the prototype for the New World Order as has been spoken about and plotted about, but he basically broke down how it's going to happen and what it's going to look like. And I want you to know that he had something interesting to say about Africa. First, he says, India, China, Russia, Africa present melanges of social systems. I don't know if I pronounced this word right, but I think it's melanges of social systems thrown together, outpaced, overstrained, shattered, invaded, exploited, and more or less subjected by the finance, machinery, and political aggression of the Atlantic, Baltic, and Mediterranean civilization. In many ways, they have an air of assimilating themselves to that civilization, evolving modern types and classes, and abandoning much of their distinctive traditions. But what they take from the West is mainly the new developments, the material achievements, rather than the social and political achievements that, empowered by modern inventions, have won their way to world prominence. They imitate European nationalism to a certain extent. From them, it becomes a convenient and form of self-assertion against the pressure of a realized practical, social, and political inferiority. But the degree to which they will or can take over the social assumptions and habits of the long-established European-American hierarchy is probably very restricted. Their nationalism will remain largely indigenous. The social traditions to which they will try to make the new material forces subservient will be the traditions of Oriental life, widely different from the original life of Europe. This is telling us several things. Number one, we know that the West went aggressively to all the peoples of the world and spread their culture. They were not spreading their culture because they liked their culture more or because they thought that their culture was great. The entire agenda was because they needed the entire world to buy into this idea that the system that they would propose to the world was the most efficient, the superior system. So long as everyone would buy into the system, then the goal would be achieved. The goal being an entire system that would be controlled singularly, one where the people would no longer wield power. Instead, the system itself would be a behemoth that would be able to rule over the world. As many people have called this the New World Order. Now, the thing about this, though, is that they're telling us right here already that certain countries present an issue to this system, realizing its ultimate achievement. Now, of course, this is China before. This is the old China. This is not the current China it's talking about. It's talking about the old India as well. But it also mentions Russia, who is also an outlier. But even Russia has changed. Russia has gone more closely to the Western ways. They're no longer communists. But the ones outliers still remains Africa, because Africa is one major hurdle to the New World Order's achievement of complete universal unity. The reason is because The development is just not there. Not that most people would not leave Africa and go to the West, but as far as people staying in Africa and also being able to live inside of this system, it's just not developmentally realistic. So read this entire, I want to read another description that he gives, particularly about the African world. We must complete our survey of the resistances against which the open conspiracy has to work by a few words about the Negro world in the regions of forest and jungle, in which barbaric and even savage human life still escapes the infection of civilization. It seems inevitable that the development of modern means of communication and the conquest of tropical diseases should end in giving access everywhere to modern administration and to economic methods, and everywhere the incorporation of the former wilderness in the modern economic process means the destruction of the material bias, the free hunting, the free access to soil of such barbaric savage communities as still precariously survive. So what we hear here is that Africa presents a hurdle to those trying to exercise maximum dominion over the entire world system. The hurdle of Africa is that because Africans live in a way that goes contrary to the West, unless they've been infected by that Western mindset, because they live in a way that's contrary to that system, the system will not be able to achieve efficiency so long as the African stands up for his own way, stands up for his own culture, stands up for his own way of life. For example, they tell us doing things like living off the land. That messes up their system because they want a system where you can't live off the land. Instead, you have to go to them in order to access the land. You have to go to them in order to access the food. You cannot simply hunt. You cannot simply rear your own cattle, rear your own food, rear your own livestock. No, you have to go to them and they will give it to you. So you hear them label this way of life that everyone at one time did live by. This way they say is barbaric and poses an obstacle to those who are trying to exercise dominion over you. But listen to this part. It says, where once the Black was native, or in which a subtropical climate is favorable to his existence at a low level of social development, there is and there is bound to be for many years to come much racial tension. The steady advance of birth control may mitigate the biological factors of this tension later on, and a general, and I'm going to try to pronounce this word right, amelioration, which is probably wrong, but of manners and conduct may efface that disposition to persecute dissimilar types, which man shares with many other gregarious animals. But meanwhile, this tension increases and a vast multitude of lives is strained to tragic issues. He goes on to say, changes in the number of half-breeds and the proportion of white and colored are changes of a temporary nature that may become controllable and rectified in a few generations. But until this level of civilization is reached, until the color of a man's skin or the kinks in a woman's hair cease to have the value of shibboleths that involve educational, professional, and social extinction or survival, a Black and white community is bound to be continually preoccupied by a standing feud, too intimate and pervasive to permit of any long views of the world's destiny. This last part I want to read. For the rest of the world, its propaganda, finding but poor nourishment in the local conditions, may retain a missionary quality for many years. So that was The Open Conspiracy. That was chapter 10 for anyone who has a book and wants to read the full context of that conversation. A number of things said in here. Number one, of course, as we said, the Negro world, as they said, poses an obstacle to those who want to infect the entire world system with a subservient class of humanity, right? Then on the other hand, we also hear that even the idea that maybe we can get rid of them, maybe we can get them to adopt a different lifestyle, maybe we can get them to take birth control. It actually says birth control. Essentially, birth control, we can get rid of their population. Their population will dwindle. And from their dwindling population, we will have a upper hand and we could see the erasure of this people who we do not want in our world system. That's the one option. The other option was also interesting. They said, here's another option. We can just basically whiten them. We can mix with them. We can have different relationships mix up and essentially erase them. And I'm not making any slight towards anyone who's biracial or whatever. I'm just telling you, this is literally the mindset of the elite. And this is important to know because I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is like an intentional effort as far as the media to push the idea that if you are African, if you are Black, that you will do better inside of a interracial relationship, you might notice certain people will get elevated once they are found out to be inside of an interracial relationship. I'll give you a good example. I really didn't see John Legend so much in the mainstream space until he got married. And so all of a sudden, he got married to a woman who's non-Black or non-African. This relationship, all of a sudden, everyone knows about it. Everyone sees it everywhere. So I'm saying that to say that there's an agenda being pushed with all of these things. There's an agenda with birth control. And I'm not someone that says birth control is wrong, but definitely do your research on what these people are putting into anything you put in your body. I do not recommend hormonal birth control. I've said that before. But they're trying to push these things. Understand the agenda. So that even if you do use it, even if you are in a relationship that is not that is a biracial relationship or interracial relationship, even if, whatever you do, understand that there's an agenda at play, that you're being manipulated through a number of causal factors to do many times what some of us just do. Some of us just try to erase our own heritage. Some of us just try to destroy our own families. Some of us just try to destroy our own communities. And you should know that all of these things are setups in order to achieve their goal, their end being the idea that this people who are a difficulty to the achievement of the Western society, obtaining a one world system where they will be able to adequately monitor, guide, regulate every single person's life, that goal is threatened by our presence, particularly when we're doing things that our ancestors have always done, like living off the land and trying to be, emphasize this, separate from Babylon. So the picture that they've given us is that essentially they need us to be in Babylon. They need us to be a part of their system, a part of the culture and the economy. If we want to separate, then we are a threat. How does this relate to the entire conversation of this video? Because we can see even the elites have recognized that they're going to have a much difficult time being able to execute their agenda depending on where a people are. And if you are inside of a city, like let's say you're in New York City, versus if you are in a place where there is really no ability for people to regulate you, if you are inside of the Congo, for example, if you are inside of some region that people just cannot know where you are, those different situations are going to lead to different results. We're going to see a lot of people who are going to suffer from Babylon's own aggression because they are in Babylon. And I pray that you understand that all because you are marked by Yahuwah does not mean that you are marked to not suffer. All of us are hated inside of the place where we are. All of the apostles of Yahusha suffered. All of them were persecuted. They suffered. Many of them were killed in horrific ways. Many of them were tortured. Understand, there's no promise that you will not suffer in this world system. So we can make a few understandings, number one, because not everyone has the strength to deal with that suffering. Some people are going to succumb. Some people are going to leave their faith behind and instead join the system in order to not suffer. So if you're one of those people, when the scripture says, flee from the daughter of Babylon, flee, come out of her, is there a reason for that? Is there a warning inside of that things are going to get worse? And understand, if you're dependent on Babylon, if you're dependent on Babylon to eat, let's say your employer, literally, if you don't have that employer, you can't eat. If you don't have something from the economy, you can't eat. If you're dependent on Babylon, if Yah strikes Babylon, if Yah strikes the economy of the United States, and it tells us in Revelations 18, by the way, that he will. When that happens, are you going to be in a place where you're severely disadvantaged to where you can't even live because of Yah's judgment? So let me read from that in closing. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of ivory, every kind of article made with very valuable wood, bronze, iron, marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, perfume, frankincense, wine, all types of things, right? It says inside of her, dropping down to verse 15, the merchants of these things who became rich from her will stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city. She was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, for in 1 hour such a great wealth has laid waste. And every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor and all who make their living by the sea stood at a distance and were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, "What city is like the great city?" They threw dust on their heads and were crying out and weeping and mourning, "Woe, woe, the great city in which all who had ships and became rich from her prosperity, for in 1 hour she's laid waste. Rejoice, O heavens, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because Yahuwah has pronounced judgment for you against her." So this entire system that H.G. Wells outlined as that of the open conspiracy, this is the same exact system that people will be mourning over. This is the same exact system that people will be torn apart over. And the fact is, if you are heavily inculcated in this system, you very well may be someone who's mourning instead of rejoicing, because we really should be rejoicing. Yah's judgment is awesome. We've been waiting for this judgment on this wicked system. So these are some thoughts just to give you when we talk about flee from the daughter of Babylon. There is obviously a spiritual component, but there's also a physical component. There's also an economic component. There's also a day by day, who do you live off of? Who do you depend on component? All of these components are going to be relevant to the end time ecclesia, the end time assembly of Yahuwah. So if we are not ready to deal with the consequences of our lifestyles, then get ready to deal with the consequences of your lifestyle, good or bad. Get ready to deal with them, because this world system is very soon coming to a short end. So that's all I have for this video. I thank you all for watching, and Yah willing, I'll see you in the next video.
You often refer to the Bible, but many of the young people who are coming to your concert don't believe in the Bible anymore.
Because the way they've been taught about the Bible, that is not the way of the Bible. You know what I mean? Because if I was living in that world where the everyday interpretation of the Bible go on, then I would have eaten the Bible too. But now that we have found the right way of the Bible, then the Bible is to be loved, because the Bible is a record of man creation. It's the only book tell you, it's the only book can show you where mankind begin without any prejudice or anything like that, any boastfulness, pride or anything. It just have how it go, and that's it. Well, all the Christian people, not even the Christian, all the people who go to churches interpret the Bible and the preachers them. That is not the right way. Because the greatest thing is that life. See, it's life. Life I deal with. If the preacher read the Bible and tell you that you have to die to go to heaven, then he's not reading the Bible. Because the Bible tells you you have to live in a heaven. You don't die and go to heaven. You have to live in heaven. You know, a lot of places on earth could be, but Africa is our heaven, because that's where we come from. You know, maybe if it's a Swiss, maybe if you're from Switzerland and the people know God, then maybe you can live in peace, unity, harmony, you know. But you know, people are stubborn on this earth because of material vanity.
To a time when the emperor first became a symbol of his country and of all Africa. Only a veteran can now remember when the last and most brutal chapter of the European scramble for Africa began. 1935, Italy claimed Ethiopia and Mussolini's troops invaded.
Arriverà al benessere, alla potenza e alla gloria. Black men, the bugle call, come on, come all the drums are beating and the bugle call, come on, don't mind what Mussolini says, let us march in battle array, and take a gun in our hand and defend the Ethiopian war, declare.
At the League of Nations in Geneva, the emperor went to plead Ethiopia's just cause. The League, fearful of a shadow which would turn into the Second World War, did nothing. Shamefully, the great powers left Ethiopia to Mussolini and the emperor to lonely exile in England.
His Majesty the Negus Haile Selassie, I call upon the first delegate of Ethiopia.
Nowhere, I think, was the emperor's tragedy felt more deeply than among the black people of the West, the slave descendants in North America and the Caribbean. Black consciousness had dawned in Jazz Age Harlem, and Africa fermented in the exiles' hearts. Many supported a black activist called Marcus Garvey, and when he demanded Africa for the Africans and repatriation to the homeland, they saw Ethiopia as a special symbol of the whole continent. Until now, it alone had not been seized by white Europeans. Such people volunteered to fight for Haile Selassie, although only a handful managed to go, or they organized to send relief.
Black Americans rallied towards the cause, and black Jamaicans likewise, and so the organization was formed in New York, 105th to 1 Lennox Avenue, New York, and as Ethiopian Welfare Federation Incorporated. Those people gave up monies, medicine, clothes, and what have you, and sent into Haile Selassie.
Do you think of yourself more as an African than a Jamaican?
Yeah, because one of the main things is that we're Rasta. From you accept Rasta, you become an Ethiopian, which is Africa. Next thing again, the history of Jamaica shows that the Arawak Indian was living there, and it belonged to the Arawak Indian. Now, our history shows that through slave business, black people come out of the Western thing, you know? So we still figure, say, Africa is a root, you know, and this is where we must return to.
What do you see as most of Africa's problems as far as uniting? I mean,
I see Africa's problem is that outside people keep on fatiguing the people, you know, and make them can't really get them things together, you know. If it's not this superpower, it's that superpower. But Africa is only a place which part of music exploit, you know. Nobody no really. Africa's so rich that it become a man who's going to Africa, steal out what he wants to steal and carry back in a film country. And Africa stay there like, you know, well, Africa ready.
Garvey used to say Africa for the Africans. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, Africa for Africans, a woman abroad, you know. True.
Will your home base, though, always be Jamaica? Or someday would you like to live in Africa?
No, someday going to be in Africa.
Yeah.
Maybe we up in Jerusalem. You know what I mean? Then in Bible land.